I hadn't been touched in years, until that night. The house was too quiet. Not just quiet in the way it gets after midnight when the refrigerator hums louder than your thoughts. No, this was the kind of silence that wraps around your throat and holds. I was curled on the couch in my robe legs, drawn up, eyes swollen from crying over a fight that didn't even feel like a fight, just another instance of Henry looking at his phone while I disappeared behind my words. He didn't even know why I'd started crying. He never asked. I didn't hear the steps. Not until the light from the hallway broke across the hardwood and stopped at my feet. I froze. I should have wiped my face, sat up straighter, pretended to be reading or half asleep. But I didn't. I couldn't. It was Caleb, my husband's son, my stepson. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd flown in late for a quick weekend, some spontaneous visit Henry forgot to mention. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since he'd filled out into the kind of man that made space feel smaller. Taller than I remembered. Broader. With that careful quietness in his eyes that always made me feel watched, even when he said nothing. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, and I hated how much that question cracked something in me. I tried to lie. "Just tired," I whispered, but my voice broke in the middle of it. My chest tightened. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked closer, slow, like he was afraid I might disappear if he moved too quickly. Then he sat beside me. Too close. The heat of him made my skin ache. I kept my eyes on the window, but I could feel him watching me. I felt his hand, before I saw it, his fingers brushing away a tear I didn't know had fallen the back of his knuckle, warm against my cheekbone. "You shouldn't be alone like this," he murmured. I didn't say a word. My breath hitched. His hand didn't move away. It just stayed there, holding my jaw like something delicate. And then he kissed me. Not rushed, not reckless. He kissed me like he knew everything I hadn't told a soul. Like the pain in my throat, the silence in my bed, the way I flinched when someone reached for me. It was all written on my lips and he was reading it. "You don't know what I became that night. Let me show you." I didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt, though, that would come later, but because of how long I sat in the dark, staring at the spot where he had kissed me. My fingertips stayed pressed to my lips like I could still feel the weight of his mouth. My robe had slipped off one shoulder. I didn't fix it. I kept hearing his words. "You shouldn't be alone like this." The cruelty of that line wasn't in what he said. It was in how much I'd needed to hear it. I didn't even realize how long I'd been invisible until someone saw me. Not just glance saw. Henry used to look at me like that once, in the early years. Before the long business trips, the habit of eating dinner in separate rooms, the quiet routines that replaced conversations. I used to try harder. I wore lipstick to bed just in case. I lit candles during dinner, even when it was just takeout. I'd sit on the edge of our mattress with lotion on my legs, hoping he'd reach for me. He stopped reaching years ago. So yes, when Caleb touched my face with both hands and told me I deserved better, I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because I was starving. And no one judges a woman for eating when she hasn't been fed in years. I tried to avoid him the next day. I stayed in the kitchen longer, took too many showers, pretended to nap. But he was everywhere. His cologne lingered in the hallway. His shirt was tossed on the back of the dining chair. He'd left his shoes by the front door like he lived there, like he belonged. And maybe that was the problem. He did belong, but not to me. That evening, after Henry fell asleep in the upstairs bedroom, I went to the patio with a glass of wine and sat barefoot in the cold. I don't know why I thought the darkness would keep him away. Caleb stepped outside 20 minutes later, a hoodie half-zipped, holding 2 fingers of bourbon in a glass. We didn't speak. He sat next to me like he had a right to. Like the kiss meant something to both of us. And maybe it did. "I shouldn't have done that," he said after a long time. I looked straight ahead. "I know, but I didn't mean it." He didn't apologize. He didn't take it back. Instead, he leaned in again, not to kiss. Not this time, but to rest his forehead against mine. His breath hit my collarbone before his hands did. His fingers brushed my knee, slid higher, and I didn't stop him. I told myself it would stop at his touch, that I would let him graze my skin, maybe even lean into the warmth of his palm, but nothing more. But that was a lie I'd already told too many times in my life. I'd told it the first time Henry forgot our anniversary. I'd told it when I started sleeping facing the wall. I'd told it to my reflection when I stopped recognizing the woman who used to laugh without biting her tongue. So when Caleb's hand moved under the thin hem of my robe, I didn't flinch. I didn't freeze. I sighed, soft and ashamed. The air between us tightened. His fingers traced the inside of my thigh like he was memorizing fault lines, the kind you whisper over before an earthquake. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice breaking somewhere inside his chest. But I didn't. The glass of wine slipped from my fingers and hit the patio floor with a dull clink, the liquid seeping into the cracks between the stones. His lips met my collarbone, then lower, then lingered at the place where my robe opened like a secret. I gasped, not from surprise, but from the unbearable relief. We moved slowly, like we were afraid of waking the night. My hands found his shoulders. He was shaking. I don't think from nerves, from restraint, from the knowledge that one more inch would mean we couldn't go back. And then I let go. I opened to him too fast, too willingly, and hated how right it felt. When we moved inside, I didn't go to the bedroom. I led him down the hallway to the laundry room. I don't know why. Maybe because it wasn't sacred. There were no memories of Henry there. Only detergent and dust and one bare light bulb. He pressed me gently against the cool wall, one hand lifting my leg around his waist, the other finding the curve of my lower back. "I've wanted you since I was too young to say it," he whispered, his voice cracked and trembling. I should have told him to stop. I should have slapped him. I should have said something that sounded like maternal decency. Instead, I kissed him harder, bit his lip, pulled his sweatshirt over his head and let it fall behind the dryer. We didn't speak again, just moved. The creak of the shelf beside us louder than our breath, the hum of the washer almost mocking, and afterward, when he wrapped me in his arms and pressed his lips to the back of my shoulder, I cried again. Not from shame, not even guilt, but because it had been so long since someone held me like I was breakable and worth breaking. I told myself it was only once, that whatever passed between us was a mistake folded inside grief, a flicker in the dark. But when the sun rose, I found his hoodie on my kitchen chair and knew I was lying again. I didn't sleep. I lay under the covers with my robe still open, my skin cooling in places he had kissed hours before. I kept hearing the way he had said it. "I've wanted you since I was too young to say it." There was nothing innocent in that voice. Nothing confused. Only years of watching, waiting, knowing. By the time I heard him in the hallway, I had already made the bed. I had already fastened the gold clasp on my robe like I could lock myself back in. "Hey," he said when he found me in the kitchen. His eyes were gentler in daylight, but the way they looked at me didn't change. Still hungry. Still patient. I didn't respond. I handed him a mug of coffee and sat at the table like I was someone's mother-in-law, not someone who had begged her stepson's body to stay inside hers just hours ago. "You okay?" he asked, sipping. I nodded, but I wouldn't meet his eyes. Henry came down the stairs 30 minutes later, yawning and oblivious, asking if anyone wanted pancakes. I said yes to the syrup before Caleb could. My voice sounded cheerful, whole. But under the table, my foot brushed Caleb's calf. He didn't move away. Later that day, when Henry left for errands, it happened again. I had just stepped out of the shower, a towel around me, steam still clinging to the bathroom mirror. I wasn't expecting Caleb to knock, let alone open the door, but when he did, he didn't apologize. He stared. I just wanted to check, he began, but the words died. I froze. Water dripped from my knee to the floor, my chest rose too fast. He took one step forward, and then another. "Don't," I whispered. But I didn't mean it. He took the towel from my hand slowly, let it fall. His breath hit my sternum before his lips did. I trembled under his weight, gasping as my body opened to his. His hands moved over me like he'd dreamt this scene, rewritten it in his head 1,000 times, and still couldn't believe it was real. "Say you want me," he whispered, pressing into me slowly, like he knew I was about to fall apart. "I can't," I moaned, digging my fingers into his shoulders. But I did. I wanted him in the way I hadn't wanted anything in years. Not just for the fire, but for the way he looked at me after. Like I was still soft, still young, still a woman. We collapsed to the floor together, breath tangled his thumb tracing my jaw while I blinked back tears. "You shouldn't look at me like that," I whispered. He leaned in, kissed me again, and said, "Then stop being the only thing I see." I started seeing ghosts in the mirror, not of the dead, but of the woman I used to be. She looked tired, pale, her wedding ring loose on her finger like it belonged to someone else. I'd glance at myself brushing my hair and see Caleb's fingerprints instead on my thighs, on my ribs, on the inside of my neck. I kept telling myself it would stop, that the intensity would burn out, that we'd get it out of our system and guilt would do the rest. But guilt is a poor extinguisher for fire that feels like love. That night, I was in the laundry room again, folding towels with shaking hands, my heart racing every time I heard a creak from the hallway. Caleb had sent a text. "I can't sleep unless I know you're okay." I didn't answer. I just stood there in silence, holding the still warm fabric to my face, inhaling the scent of a home that wasn't mine anymore. Then I heard it. The front door unlocking. "Henry!" I panicked, shoved the towels into the basket, checked my reflection in the hall mirror. There was still a red bloom across my collarbone where Caleb had kissed too hard. Henry called my name once. I steadied my voice and said I was folding laundry. He grunted, opened the fridge, the sound of a beer bottle twisting open. I pretended everything was fine. Then Caleb appeared behind me in the hallway, barefoot, still damp from his shower, his hair tousled, no shirt. I froze. He reached out and touched the small of my back. "Not here. Not now." But I couldn't say it out loud, not with Henry 10 feet away. I mouthed, "Go back." Caleb leaned in anyway. His lips brushed the shell of my ear. "You tremble when you lie," he whispered. My knees nearly gave out. I stepped away just in time to hear Henry call from the kitchen. "Did you grab the laundry sheets, babe?" "Coming," I said, my voice a full octave too high. When I returned with the basket, Henry was standing by the sink, smiling faintly. He kissed my forehead and said, "You look flushed." "I'm just warm." I lied, but my skin was burning for a different reason. That night, I lay in bed beside my husband, stiff as wood. I could feel his breath against my back, but it felt distant, performed. When he turned away, I slipped from bed, padded down the hall like a ghost. Caleb's door opened before I knocked. We didn't speak. He pulled me in, pushed his knee between mine, kissed me like he didn't care if the whole house heard. And in the quiet, after while I lay against his chest with my wedding ring, catching the moonlight on his bedsheet, I finally said it. "I think I love you." He didn't answer. He just held me tighter. I stopped wearing perfume. I couldn't risk leaving traces on his skin. Every little thing became a calculation. A glance in the hallway, the way my blouse clung to damp skin. Whether Henry noticed how long I stayed in the shower. Whether Caleb's fingers left impressions that couldn't be hidden by cotton and denial. And yet, I didn't stop. I told myself it was temporary. A sickness. A fever of the body and mind. But how do you undo something that made you feel alive for the first time in years? We never used words like love again. Not because it wasn't real, but because saying it out loud would have made it too dangerous, too permanent. Instead, we let silence speak for us. A hand on the small of my back while I loaded the dishwasher. His thumb brushing mine when I handed him a glass. Me leaning my head on his chest while the laundry spun. He was leaving soon, Back to his city, his job, his real life. He didn't say it, but I saw it in how he lingered by the window watching the sky darken earlier each day. The night before he left, I found him in the guest room sitting on the edge of the bed, with both hands pressed to his face. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He looked up, eyes rimmed in red. "I don't know how to leave you." I sat beside him. My robe fell open slightly. He didn't look away. "You have to," I whispered. He nodded, but he didn't move. We didn't touch that night. We lay beside each other fully clothed, breathing in rhythm, like if we stayed still, enough time would freeze and let us have this without consequence. In the morning, I didn't walk him to the door. I listened from upstairs as Henry offered him coffee, joked about traffic. I heard the door shut. I counted to 20. Then I went to the guest room. His hoodie was still there, and so was a note, folded, barely written, just 4 words in his messy handwriting. "You were worth it." I pressed it to my lips. That night when Henry pulled me into his arms, I let him. I kissed him like nothing had happened. I smiled at dinner. I laughed at his joke. But my body remembered something else. A younger man's breath on my neck. Hands that trembled for me. A kiss that made me cry because it felt like I mattered again. And I kept the note, tucked in the back of my jewelry box, next to my wedding ring I sometimes remove when I sleep. If this story touched something you're afraid to say out loud, tell me, anonymously, or just stay here and feel it with me. Subscribe to Love Deceit for every story we never dared to speak.